It's coming. This suspenseful drama is adapted from the popular Korean manga. Light Shop, a suspenseful dry year. I Love You, and the original manga artist. Kanko is the scriptwriter. Lighting Shop is also from his manga of the same name. This time, Ju Ji-hoon, Park Young, Kim Hee-won, and others. I can't wait to see what's in store for us. Let's cut to the chase. Let's go straight to the plot. It's the only illuminated store at the end of the alley. The woman hesitated for a long time, but she decided to turn around and leave. A late-night commuter sleeps in the car. She is awakened by the mechanical beeping of her destination. A woman sits on a bench at the station. She kept her head down and didn't say a word. This is not the first time the commuter has seen her. It's always the last train, and every time it's the same long, silent hair. The woman in the large suitcase beside her. The commuter has never spoken to her. I only vaguely hear the woman's fingers touching the bench. The sound of her fingers on the bench. We see each other again and again. The office worker couldn't hold back his curiosity. It was the same night, when he came home late. He took the initiative and asked the woman what she was doing here. She said she was waiting, but that was the last train. What was she waiting for? The commuter was kind enough to take out his cell phone and call her a cab. But then he realizes that the screen has somehow shattered. Luckily, the phone should still work. The woman didn't answer his call. Instead, she asked, "Don't you know me?" When she heard the man's negative answer, she lowered her head in frustration. It was pouring rain that night. The woman sat on the bench as usual. "Don't you know me?" A thunderclap sounded in both ears. The woman said it would ensue. The day is almost over. She's running out of time, but it's cold now. She wants to go to the office worker's house. She carries her bulky suitcase with the office worker. She walks with the office worker downstairs. Even though it was inconvenient, he wouldn't let her help him. The office worker pressed the button for the 8th floor. He came out of the elevator. The two of them walked for a long time down the deep corridor. They finally arrived at his house. The room was empty. There's little in the way of decoration. A flash of lightning. The woman's face was shaped so strangely. She approached slowly. The door closes at that moment. It seems like a quiet night at the hospital. The nurses on the night shift in the ICU. The night shift nurses in the are discussing where they're going for dinner. There's only one nurse left standing guard. It's always been a no-go for outsiders. But when Nurse Park looked up, she saw an Uhm wandering around. He asked Nurse Park, "Where's the morgue?" "I haven't figured it out yet." "Who is this man?" An alarm suddenly came from the monitor. "It's a patient in the first bed with a detached oxygen tube. Luckily, we were able to save him in time. It didn't cause a serious accident." But when Nurse Park remembered that strange man, she looked back. He was gone. It's too cold for a man in an apartment. He's huddled under the covers. He got mad at the barking dog. He curses a few times. Under the covers again. The owner of the lighting store. Wearing sunglasses all the time, even at night. He's never flawed. The store is exactly what it sounds like. He sells lamps for lighting. He stocks vintage bulbs from decades ago. He wrote down every transaction in his ledger. Nurse Park also kept a chart. And in her chart, Nurse Park wrote down every patient's information. At that moment, the strange man from the hospital, he came to the lighting store. He looked around. He looked around and around, as if he was looking for something. In the end, he didn't say a word. He turned around and left. Until the next customer arrived, the owner's nervousness finally relaxed. There are all kinds of customers at the lighting store, especially at midnight. And after sending this customer away, the man wrapped in a blanket because he was cold, came to the store as soon as he approached. As soon as owner's eyes and the bulbs were frosted over. The man didn't come to buy a lamp. He seemed to be looking for a barking dog. He circled around, cursed, and to Leffen. He almost touched the bulb before it returned to normal. We've had a lot of strange customers tonight. It wasn't long before a pair of red shoes entered the room. She had long hair. She was dressed in black. She tried to reach out and touch the light bulb, but the boss stopped her. She withdrew her hand in frustration. She left the store without saying a word. The boss was always on the lookout for her movements. The students at the school are going home. A girl with short hair wandered into the school building. A female student rushed out to greet her, but she didn't get a response. Tonight, the teachers are keeping them for mandatory study. The students gathered together. They told a story they heard. There was didn't know, who is not known to anyone. The empty desks in every classroom would be that person's seat. After class, students would pass through a necessary armor. There's a rumor. There are people walking in the alley at night, and there's a strange singing sound. But this alley, Ju used to run errands for her mother. After her friends left, she had no choice but to take a step. The weak light from her cell phone wasn't enough to support her courage. I don't know if it's because of the rumors. When she looked back, she saw a figure. She was so scared, she ran for her life. Luckily, at the end of the alley was a lighted store. The owner would always hand out candy for her to choose from. As was her custom, she still chose the yellow candy. Ju lives with her mother. It was said that her father was always abroad on business. He couldn't see her often, and the anti-lost necklace he made for Ju. She carries it with her every day. Ju remembered the strange figure in the alley. Her boss explained that she might have seen something. He explained that he might have seen something that ordinary people don't normally see. He called them strangers. Occasionally, strangers would visit the store. The boss had been around long enough, he could tell the difference between them and ordinary people. Women who grew taller, men covered in frost, or a man dripping with water. Just be careful when you meet them. Just pretend nothing happened. In the end, Hyun, Ju listened carefully to her boss. She didn't notice the reflection of the water on the table. His face turned pale. When he was done speaking, the boss handed Hyun Ju a flashlight, so that she would be less afraid when walking at night. After she left, the boss saved her leftover candy wrappers in a small wooden box. He saved them in a small wooden box. The night was breathtakingly quiet. The woman on the bench, dragging her suitcase, approaching the office worker. The office worker toweled and wiped the rain for her. Surprised to find that the woman's fingernails were long. No wonder when she touched the bench. When she touched the bench, the woman drops her suitcase. He stared at her with rapt attention. The commuter slowly opened the suitcase. Inside was a full set of knives. The elevator's on the 8th floor. When Hyun, she bumped into a woman with a suitcase. She greeted her politely, but the woman stopped where she was. She looked back at her home. At that moment, blood dripped the suitcase. There's a new tenant in the neighborhood. She didn't like living in a building with too many neighbors, so she found a room on the 1st floor. It's not very nice, it's not well furnished. It's a 3-bedroom apartment. One of the doors was locked, but the landlord said it's near an alley. It's surrounded by empty houses. It's quiet at night, and the rent is really cheap. There's no other option that's more suitable. Sun-hwa cleaned up a bit. She filled the room with her luggage. It's barely cozy. She laid a carpet in front of the door. Home sweet home. She covered the door that was an eyesore. And she made it clean as a whistle. It's true that there's no one living in the neighborhood, but there was one thing that bothered Sun-hwa. Every night, a boy's voice would come singing. As she walked down the alley, her voice became louder and louder. When it finally quieted down, Zenkai fell asleep. She didn't notice the change in her shadow. A stranger seemed to be hiding in the darkness. In recent days, this cheap apartment has been getting stranger and stranger. The light bulb goes out every now and then. When I check the electric gate, there's nothing wrong with it. It's hard to wait for the power to come on. After taking a shower and drying my hair, I heard a song in the alley. The boy was standing in the alley. He saw a figure with an umbrella in front of him. He ran away in a hurry. Sun-hwa was amazed by the singing. Her apartment. Suddenly the power went out again. She turned her head and saw some light coming from the locked door. There was a little light coming out of the locked door. She went up to the door and unlocked it without a second thought. The doctor is examining the symptomatic patient. The patient's condition is not good. We'll need to keep him under observation. Next to him is an alcoholic. He's got a severe case of catatonia. Because there are not enough beds, he was temporarily transferred to the ICU. There are many patients. Families are waiting outside the door. The doctor explained the next step is to rely on the patient's will to live. Seeing the desperate faces of the family members, Nurse Park has mixed feelings. Their cries there will lingers in her mind. It won't go away. Someone asked Nurse Park outside the restroom, where does a patient's willpower come from? How can a seriously ill patient with no consciousness? How can a patient with a serious illness who doesn't have any conscience develop a will? Nurse Park didn't know how to answer. In fact, she's had serious accidents before. She lost consciousness. The doctor said the same thing to her mother. I thought there was nothing I could do. But Nurse Park woke up like a miracle. But she still doesn't know how she developed the will to live. At that moment, someone outside rapped on the door. The lights flashed. A woman rushed from the top of the room. She was screaming for her life. For a split second, the neighborhood returned to normal. The janitor heard a voice. He asked, what happened? Was it just a hallucination? Zenkai approached the door that was supposed to be locked. There was a bright light bulb hanging there. When he removed it, the boys singing in the alley were shocked. After Sun-hwa asked him why he was disturbing the public, he was so scared, he ran away. It's near the end of the school day. Some of the students are so tired that they fall asleep on their desks. Hyun. Ju tried to wake him up several times but didn't succeed. She had to walk home alone down the alley. She used the flashlight given to her by her boss to light up the path. Just as she entered the alley, she saw a woman in red high heels. Hyun. Ju kindly took an umbrella with her. She went down the alley, but she felt more and more strange. The woman's hair seems to be getting longer. She started walking strangely. Her body gradually reached a height that she couldn't even reach when she raised her head. Hyun. Ju made an excuse to leave. When she turned around, the woman followed her with a twisted pace. The boss heard the screams and came out to check on her. He told Ju to go home first. Then he took off his glasses. The woman stopped where she was. After staring at her boss, she slowly returned to normal. At that moment, the sleeping student woke up. She looked back and saw a girl she had never seen before. There's a girl she's never seen before. A boy in the alley. He met a girl with a suitcase on the bench. She asked him if she could accompany her to the lighted store end of the street. If she went there, she can go home. The lights in Sun-hwa's rented house are broken again. She can barely take a shower by flashlight. She was cleaning up the floor. She found a large amount of long hair, but she had short hair. At that moment, the only remaining light went out. The boy and the girl on the bench were just passing by. He told me why he was afraid of this room. That night, he saw another person's silhouette. He saw the figure of another person behind him. Sun-hwa also felt the figure of a man protruding from the mirror. He felt like he was being watched every night. It turns out that the lights are always malfunctioning. It's because that is blocking the darkness. The girl on the bench tried to knock on the door. The boy took her hand, but she fell to the ground at the strange feeling at her fingers. The woman tells her there's no difference between them. Only then does the boy notice his twisted legs. He struggles to get up and run away, but realizes he can't get out of the alley. And Sun-hwa couldn't open the damn door. She smashed the window for help. The boy lies exhausted. Their cries echoed through the alley. A woman with a long chair just arrived at the lighting store. Then a man claiming to be a criminal police officer. He also came to the door. Just a month ago, Jung-eun was lit at apartment. She heard a knock at the door. She turned off the lamp. She turned off the lamp to make it look like no one was home. But the noise at the door became louder and louder. Kang-eun screamed in a frenzy. She didn't calm down until she couldn't hear any more. She carefully opened the door. There was a pair of like eyes hiding in the corner, rushing toward him. The scene changes. A man in a weird hoodie. He boarded a bus from Seoul to Gangneung. When he was about to start, he went to call the driver. He dismissed all the passengers. He was arrested on charges of persecuting Kang-eun, a woman living alone in a Cheondo-dong apartment. He was arrested for persecuting Kang-eun, a woman living alone in a Cheondo-dong apartment, and for arson and extinguishing evidence. He looked up and saw a familiar figure in front of him. He was so shocked that he couldn't speak. The detective handed the prisoner over to the backup police. It's a strange night. I couldn't get the lighter to light. The detective's hands are covered in dirt. And the coffee vending machine stopped working. Nothing's going well. In the last few days, there have been so many accidents. We've been dealing with one case at a time. There's a new case coming up. A suspect has just been released. The suspect was released in a murder case of an elderly man. Kim Sang-hoon was at the scene. After investigation, he's just a witness. Late at night, the detective went to the scene of the murder. He's known as a tough guy. He never forgets even the smallest things. He's just too stubborn. As long as he's in his sights, even if the case is closed, it'll become an open case. Until the truth comes out, he won't let go with a smile on his face. That's why his arrest rate is high, but the actual rate is very low. There's an obsessive sense of futility. The police noticed the old man's door had a strange booth. The police at the scene speculated that the cause of death was acute myocardial infarction. His wife passed away a long time ago. He usually lived alone. Recently, he only talked to his grandchildren abroad by phone. The old man's peaceful face seems to have nothing to do with the pain of his heart attack. The detective moved the remote control on his left side. Something didn't feel right. Only the channel button on the remote control is worn out. It seems the old man doesn't use other functions. But why is the replay function on the TV on? All the suspicions point to the old man's departure. The detective went home. It's empty. No life. Every memory of him and his wife is stored here. It's human nature to feel sad. And some memories that weigh on the heart make it impossible to breathe. Can become a prison. You can't get out until you're dead. The results of the old man's autopsy came back. His blood was drawn to confirm the component value. The cause of death was confirmed to be an acute myocardial infarction. The coroner, based on the old man's condition and case history, the coroner ruled that an autopsy was not necessary in this case, and the will of the deceased, who was far away from home, also wanted the old man to die in one piece, and they agreed to the coroner's recommendation. The case should have been closed, but the detective felt something was missing. He had forensics pull maps of the old man's neighborhood, and they found a clue. The detective visited all the locations on the map, all the restaurants with takeout trucks. One only. At nightfall, we zeroed in on a noodle shop. The store was quiet. Only the owner was busy in the kitchen. Interpol ordered noodles with fried sauce. He began to look around at the decker. He recognizes the owner of the restaurant. He recognized the owner of the restaurant as Kim Sang-hoon, the witness in the old man's murder case. The restaurant doesn't take out program. Customers usually make reservations by phone, the detective said with a deeper meaning. The old man's phone records. He didn't call the restaurant, so Kim Sang-hoon took it upon himself to deliver it. It said that the old man died of an acute heart attack. but in the eyes of the detective, there are a lot of suspicions. One is that he didn't die peacefully. 2 old man never used the replay function. 3 the old man right-handed, but the remote control at the scene was on his left hand. 4 the house that coincides with the take it phase. Old man's face has what looks like old man's marks. It's actually the sauce from the fried noodles. Of course, Kim Sang-hoon had to pretend he didn't understand. The police can't arrest him. He had to say that he'll be watching him all the time. He'll be watching him all the time. 1 month later, the police arrest him on the street for buying cars. Kim Sang-hoon, who was chasing after a woman. But when he saw the woman's face, he was shocked. Isn't that Kang Min, who died in an arson attack a month ago? Kim Sang-hoon screamed that this woman shouldn't be here. He rushed forward. The detective who subdued him again realized. Kim Sang-hoon's eyes were like an owl. After that, the detective came to the lighting store. After confirming with the owner. After checking with the owner, he didn't see Kim Sang-hoon. He also noticed that the bench girl was about to leave. Her suitcase was dripping blood. The bench woman explained that at the latest day, the detective didn't suspect anything. She put on a jacket to protect her from the rain. At the same time, Ju was in the middle of her run. She remembered that she hadn't bought the light bulb that her mother wanted. When she turned back, she passed by the bench woman. But because the boss was entertaining, the police had no time for him. He could only leave in a hurry. The light bulbs in the store were flickering, as if it was a sign of things to come. He went back to Taping Street when he at the Regional Emergency Medical Center. She worked with an assistant to groom the deceased. She heard a noise from someone who was supposed to be there. She was scared out of her wits. And the undertaker told her, there's a lot of gas escaping from the body when the deceased leaves. It's a normal phenomenon. They bowed solemnly to the deceased. Then they stuffed her mouth with cotton to prevent the odor from spreading and to keep the face of the deceased intact. In fact, there's a secret in the mortuary that no one has ever told. He can hear the voices of the deceased. Every time he sends them away, he would advise them to let go of their attachment to time. The dead are also afraid of the dark, and then they sigh when they're pushed into the morgue. And the undertaker would always say, they will soon go to a pleasant and cozy place, and forget all the bad memories of the world after that. All that's left is the spit in the morgue. This time, the deceased's name is Vicky Chung. Nurse Park also works at the medical center. She parked her car in the basement as usual, but she always felt like somebody followed her. Waiting for the elevator, an older man with black shoes approached. He was standing in the corner of the elevator. He was covered in water but wouldn't press the elevator. He just said he was going to the 8th floor. But that's where Nurse Park works in the ICU. At this hour of the night, visitation has already been canceled. Why is he going to 8th floor? He didn't answer. Ask him. Are there a lot of accidents upstairs? Will they still wake up? Nurse Park told him. It depends on the patient's will. When he heard that, he closed his eyes tightly. His face was full of pain. A trail of water spreads. The water suddenly reached his feet. Water is dripping from his body. The elevator is out of order. The light flickers in the blink of an eye. The ladybird is suddenly caught in the current. When he was about to be suffocated, the elevator reaches the 8th floor. Everything was back to normal, but she was the only one caught on the surveillance camera. I've been working in hospitals for a long time. I've seen a lot of things. This small difference doesn't affect Bleach's mood. She put a headset in a patient's ear. On the instructions of the head nurse, 2 more car accident patients came in. The detective is in the lighting store. He asked the owner if he saw a man who looks like Kim Sang-hoon. Have you seen a man named Kim Sang-hoon? He has strange eyes, like an owl. Maybe it's more like a cat's eyes. At that moment, the detective's eyes changed. He calmed down. He continued to ask questions. The boss asked the detective why did he find this place. The nurses are complaining because of the big car accident not long ago. There's not enough staff now. There are not enough beds. The patient with alcohol poisoning is getting better. He'll be moved to the general ward. Seeing the way he's frozen, Nurse Park had an idea. Alcoholics are often delirious, yelling about dirt falling everywhere. It's like they're talking to someone they can't see. In severe cases, there's usually a lookout. Poor thinking skills. They can distinguish between space and people. They also experience hallucinations. So who is the person in her hallucinations? Actually, that person, Nurse Park saw too in a major accident. He got his life back. Since then, he's seen a lot of people. Strangers who shouldn't exist. They look like normal people. You can't tell unless you look closely. The man on the 8th floor. He owes a huge loan. He was thrown into the ground alive by his creditors. He's hovering between life and death. He doesn't seem to know where he should go. So Nurse Park cleaned the ear canal of the man lying on the bed, cleaned out his ear canals, and put on the headphones, just like when he lost consciousness. When Hyun-Ju came home, she bumped into the bench girl, thinking that he met her on the 8th floor of the apartment. She wasn't alert. The benchwoman asked her, "What do you buy light bulbs for your mother every day?" Then she remembers that her mother is still waiting at home. She said goodbye, hurry. On the playground below the apartment, there's a man looking around. Says a dog is barking. He can't sleep because of the barking. Ju shines a flashlight. His body is covered with frost. He doesn't look like a normal person at all. The man didn't seem to want to get involved. He asked him a few questions and left with the book. A patient with symptoms has regained signs of life. He's been on the verge of death several times. What's keeping him alive? There's Park said. Maybe the so called will. Maybe the so called will doesn't just come from him. The benchwoman and the office worker. The frosty man. The uncle who owes a huge loan. Shimokai, who can't get out of his apartment. And the boy who fell in the alley. They all seem to hear the same voice. It turns out that every one of them are all patients in the 8th floor ICU. At the same time, Ju ran back to the 8th floor of the apartment. The trash can is filled with light bulbs he bought. Her mother always leaves the lights on when she's at home. She didn't say a word. After listening to Ju's chatter, mother and daughter hugged each other tightly. Ju smelled the scent of flowers on her mother's body, and that scent came from the funeral. No one noticed. Outside the door, the bench girl is peeping. This is the content of Light Shop episodes 1-4. The original series was updated weekly and will be explained as soon as it comes out. Now it's known that most of the timeline has been messed up. The people who appear in the lighting shop, almost all of them are patients in the ICU. If you haven't read the source material, it may be a little confusing, but all the buildup. It's all about bringing all the pieces to bring all the pieces together. Strictly speaking, this drama is still very close to the original. That's why the moment when the truth is revealed will be very exciting, and it's going to be really powerful. Trust me.